Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for today's virtual program, Branding Boldly, Building a Nonprofit Identity That Shines with Jocelyn Harms. I am Brittany Spillman, and I have the privilege of serving as the Managing Director of the Carey Center's Community and Collegiate Programs. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors who make programs like this possible. Our presenting sponsor for today is the Walker Area Community Foundation, a nonprofit grant-making organization that works every day to build permanent resources, spark meaningful conversation, inspire action, and empower partners to make a difference. We are also grateful to our community and collegiate program sponsors, Auburn University Outreach, the Kim and Tim Hudson Endowed Fund for Excellence, Auburn University Outreach Office of Public Service, the Drummond Thorne Stukes Endowed Fund for Excellence, and a community service grant made possible by State Representative Joe Lovern. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Jocelyn Harms, founder of Password Creative, is a story brand certified guide with more than 20 years of experience in messaging, marketing, branding, and design. She helps nonprofits develop clear identities and compelling storytelling that support outreach and development goals. Jocelyn believes strong identity work is one of the most valuable investments that organizations can make of how it shapes messaging, culture, and strategy. Her collaborative approach begins with listening to understand what makes your mission and organization unique in order to develop practical, engaging materials that connect with stakeholders. Please join me in welcoming Jocelyn Harms.
Hey everyone, great to be here. Thank you so much, Brittany. I'm gonna get my screen shared and we can dive on in. All right. Everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Great. All right. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talk about this topic that I really love. So let's dive in. Let's see here. Oh, just one second. It's not going forward here. There we go. So I really want to just start out by asking the somewhat rhetorical question, why does brand identity really matter? I mean, for all the things that you have to spend time on, fundraising, program development, why spend time on not only building a strong brand identity, but maintaining it? And the answer I'm going to say is trust. You know, we need to get to know people before we can have a sense of trust with them. We need to, know someone's name, know what they're about, understand them. And the same is true with organizations. The same is true across the board for businesses. There's a lot of stats that back this up. Edelman's 2019 Trust Barometer report cites that 81% of consumers need to trust a brand before they even consider buying from it. Their 2025 report put trust as equal to price and quality as a consideration. So trust really matters when it comes to consumer engagement across the board, and that's regardless of your nonprofit organization, for-profit organization. It's just simply behavior that people have when they engage with an organization. Um, when it comes to nonprofits, though, what can really drive trust? The Nonprofit Alliance's Trust Report from 2025 really cites that storytelling and personal engagement are one of the ways that can really build that trust. You can see that when we really think about how we use communication to connect people with your nonprofit, it truly does give a boost. Here's some other things. Efficient operations, people understanding that. I have the word perception bolded here because even the perception of efficiency can drive a 15% rise in donor trust. Here's an amazing second part of that. 72% of donors value clear processes. That is simply communicating your processes to people that they understand it. For them to know what it is, you have to be able to share that. When give.org asked participants to, tell us, what gives you the understanding that that an organization is trustworthy, the top answer was accomplishments shared by the organization. Again, communication, storytelling, people understanding you and what you're about and what you do. The next highest answer was that they engaged a third party evaluation by an independent organization. So, again, transparency and communicating that sense of transparency. Clear governance, again, more of this similar transparency and then communicating out what that is. 93% of people said that strong governance was essential when giving. And then here's a stat that I really love. And this again is communication, that 60% of donors who understood and viewed CEO compensation as justified reported higher overall trust. So again, this is a communication. This is saying, here's why we pay our people what we pay, and giving people an understanding to the processes and the value. This last item I'm going to share is from also from give.org. This is kind of on the flip side. And again, communication, communication, communication. The top thing that said that participants were discouraged from in giving was when they weren't sure what the nonprofit would do with the money that they donated. So again, there's a lot of things that identity work and communication can really do when it comes to driving trust. And we know that trust is critical for not only community engagement, for donor engagement. So, what is identity really? It's more than a logo. A lot of people will say, well, here's our brand, and it's just their logo. But really, identity is much more than that. Today's takeaways are really going to dive into all the elements that come together to form your brand identity. I want to talk through and highlight what a lot of trusted brands get right so that you can take that wisdom back to your organization and apply it in ways that make sense for you. And then we're also going to go through some just really practical actions to either build or strengthen each element within your brand identity work. So let's dive in here. There are, like I said, your identity is more than your logo, but it is, an element of that, your visuals. So, yes, it is your logo, but it's also your colors. It's also the photography that you use, to tell your story. It's also the, icons and graphic elements that you use to that, coupled with your message, the way that you talk about what you do. This is more than your mission, vision, and values. It is every way that you talk about yourself and the messages that you have prepared. Um, we also have your reputation, how other people talk about what you do, how other people experience your organization in many different ways. And then fourth, we have your culture. How are you building your identity from that inside out space? And that culture can influence how your staff use your messaging. It influences how your visuals are played out, and it certainly influences your reputation. So, want to go through each of these sections, and we're going to start with messaging today. Trusted brands really enable people to easily talk and share about their organization. When we think about, any product that you buy or any service that you have that you say, man, here's what this organization does. That's language that they have created and that you have then co-opted. So really having a lot more than mission and vision, but the tone of voice that you use, the way that you behave, your elevator pitch, talking points. These are all tools that can be used to do that. So this kind of brings me to action item number one. Excuse me. Expanding beyond your mission, vision, and values and developing a full brand platform. And then within that, engaging your teams in owning and the key, using it. There's a lot of times where, great things get built, but then the time to orient and to get it into use doesn't happen. And so it sits there. Your mission and vision and values do a lot of work for you, but they don't really tell people specific benefits that you bring to the community. They don't tell your team the tone of voice that you should use in every communication. They don't tell the community how you're positioned in the marketplace within the community. So let's look at what some of the components of a brand platform are. Excuse me. Along with your mission, vision, and values, a brand platform should include your brand voice, which is the tone of voice that you use in everything. It could be a few different things, but think of this more as like when you think about, oh, you know, Brittany she always has this sort of welcoming tone when she speaks to people. That's a voice that she has, and a voice also is relevant when you think about an organization. It should include brand behaviors, how you behave in the community to achieve your mission. These are approaches that you take to everything that you do. It should include your benefits to the community, your benefits to the donor. These can be very specific to specific programs. Um, it should include brand positioning. If you have within your community, if there's a few organizations that do adjacent work to what you do, brand positioning could be very important to let people know sort of where you sit among those organizations. It should include an elevator pitch, core and key messages, and talking points. Talking points can be for your entire organization, and you should also have them for individual programs. They can get very, very granular as you need to really hit everything and communicate truly about your program. So I want to give a few examples of this for I'm sure there's some people here who have some sort of brand platform, but for those that haven't, I just kind of want to give a little peek behind the curtain as an example. So here's an organization that I've worked with. This you can see their mission at the top, and then here's an example of brand behaviors. To deliver on our mission, we are. And then they have these actions. So this would be something they could use to influence the culture within their organization. If they had as an organization internally, we always collaborate. Um, it could include, it should influence strategic decisions in the way that they would approach things. So they have their brand behaviors here. Brand voice, you can see that they have three tones that they have. I would recommend not having more than three or four, just so that you don't get it too diluted. But you can see that we have some descriptions here and then some really practical actions in making those happen. Here's our core and key messages here. You can notice on the core message that their mission is not listed in here. However, instead, it's a very specific to what they do. Also becomes more descriptive of what their mission actually is. And it's really broken up into three parts. That first sentence is the problem that they're solving. The second part of the second sentence is the action that they actually do. And then the last part of that sentence is the benefit they bring to the community. So this core message can do a lot of work. Instead of saying their mission, if they're saying this core message out, I can walk away from that person, know exactly what the problem is, exactly what they do, and exactly the benefit they're bringing to the community. All right, action number two. Make sure there are clear calls to action in all you do. Make that process to donate, engage, volunteer straightforward and easy. If there is a web page on your site that doesn't have a call to action at the end of the page, add it. Every single page on your website should have some sort of call to action to direct people somewhere. Even if it's to go to another page on your site, it doesn't always have to be donate, but if you're scrolling down the about page and before the footer, you want to get people to learn more about your programs, then tell them that. Tell people what you want them to do and make it very clear and understanding why. So just make sure that there's calls to action all you do, because otherwise I'm going to get to a bottom of the page or a bottom of some sort of collateral, and I don't know what you want me to do. So it's your job to tell them, hey, I want you to now learn about our programs. And then at the end of that program page, I want to say, hey, I want you to see your volunteer options for this program. If you have read this far, do this. Everything should be an invitation to take that next step. It doesn't have to go straight to donate, but it can go to that next step of engagement. All right, so here's some key reflections when it comes to your messaging. How equipped does your own team feel they are when it comes to talking about your organization? I want you to think about if every single person in your office was sick, except for one person, and a news outlet called and said, give me a synopsis of your organization and what sort of benefits you bring to the community. Could literally anyone in your organization answer that clearly, confidently, and you would feel good about that person representing what you do. If you're kind of not sure if the answer is no, then take a step back, create some of that content, create those elements within your brand platform, and get people using, testing them out, owning it, making it their own, so that they can then represent your organization in a confident way. And then secondly, you're giving people a clear and accessible path to follow, to be the hero, be that change maker for your organization, to engage with them. Look for different ways where you say, hey, usually we have this, but gosh, we're really missing it in these three places. So let's fix that. All right. Let's move on to visuals. Trusted brands really own their representation by giving people the resources they need to get it right. How many of you have pulled up a flyer and or some t-shirt and there's a logo soup and there's one or two logos that are pixelated or they're squished or something like that? I'm sure that person who is making that piece of collateral tried to get all the good logos, and they, for whatever reason, could not get a good logo for one of those things. That's a miss. You need to be able to steward your own assets and be able to get it to people so that they can get it right for you. So that really takes me to action item number one. Get your logo files in order. You need to have multiple versions. You need to have an EPS version, which means that you can make it as small as a half inch and it can go on a billboard and never be devalued. If you have made your logo on Canva, that's totally fine. But what I would do is seek out a designer to recreate that logo as a true EPS vector file so that you have the files that you need to always be in control of your logo. You also need PNG files that have that transparent background. I'm sure some of you have also seen a logo place that has that big white box around it and it's on some sort of cream or darker background. When you have a PNG logo, it means that it's transparent in the background. It can go anywhere. You're not going to have those white boxes that the JPEGs bring. Versioning wise, having full and one color logos. So a logo that's all black, a logo that's all white, and then your full version. Vertical and horizontal orientations so that you can, use the right logo for the right places. Ultimately, what I say is don't let someone else devalue your visual identity with a bad file. You're the steward. Have everything in order for yourself. All right, let's talk color for action item number two. Um, I know that, if you have a logo that has two or three colors and then you're saying that's your color palette, but think about the use case. Think about how many programs you have and marking those. If you have a lot of things with data sets, wayfinding, think about how you need to maybe build a broader color palette to meet the true needs of your organization. I have two quick examples of this. This is an example from an agency that serves nonprofits. Their logo is top two colors, the top two teal and navy blue that's on the left, and then they have these five additional colors in their palette. The problem was that they were doing a lot of data sets and they would run out of colors. And so they had different staff people arbitrarily grabbing colors and nothing ever looked the same. We extended their palette, adding these five colors on the right. Taken apart, they don't really look like they go together. However, when you put them together in this color wheel, you can see that tonally they're all the same. And now if they had some sort of chart that they needed to make that had a huge data set, they would be able to have colors that all work together, complemented their primary palette, and then it would be consistent from, staff person to staff person, and those people didn't have to guess which color to use. We also have clear guidance that these additional five colors are for expansive data sets only. Another quick example is an organization that was really growing from one program to 8 distinctive programs, and they were rebranding. So we gave them a color palette of 8 colors. They could assign each program a primary color, And that would provide some visual cues for people engaging with them to say, oh, for our hygiene program, we always use yellow as a lead color. And so you can see how can become more important in a way to their identity than the logo colors themselves. All right, let's talk about some graphic assets. I'm sure you have spent time, a half hour on Canva searching for random icons that don't match, and then someone else on your team is also doing the same thing, and you're using different icons for similar things, and they don't really go with your visual styles. Don't make your team search for random icons. Uh, it's time wasted, and it also does not drive visual consistency. So really spend time to make some graphic assets for your team. Again, want to show a quick example here. This was for an organization that had a leaf in their logo. It was a collective impact group, and the designer gave us actually 20 different leaf graphics to use. And you can see how on the far right here, we have this kind of ghosted leaf on the page. It gives a really nice design element and makes it more visually interesting when we were building content. We also created a very extensive icon library. Um, we didn't spend a lot of money on this. We went to iStock. We found a designer that had a very, wide variety of libraries. We bought the few ones that we needed, knowing that we could go back and get similar styles um, to match later if we needed to. You can see how the style of these icons influences the design of the report. The line weights around the numbers, the line weights around the quotes, just the general style, it starts to inform everything. So we've got a lot of visual consistency here, and the designer had a lot to work with because those were in place. We also can notate that these icons are then named certain things so that everyone knows, hey, when we're talking about this, certain work group, we always use this icon, and then everyone has access to it. So again, enabling people to do it right. All right, and finally, action four is really using, images to strategically, support your story. You need more than smiling, posed faces for your images. There's so many times that I get, images from a nonprofit to use in a report, and all it is people posing for the camera. I don't know what you do if it's only people looking at the camera and smiling. So here's a great example of this. Let's say that you're an adult literacy nonprofit. If you use pictures A and B together, great. I can tell a story. There's some success and then there's people in action. However, if I'm just looking at picture I have no idea what you do. I just know that people are happy, but I don't really know why and don't know kind of what their backgrounds are. But if I look at picture B, I can say, okay, it looks like they do some sort of educational work, obviously for adults or college age people. I have some kind of idea of what you do. Also, notice the angle in which this photo is shot. It's shot from the back of the room. We're giving privacy to the people sitting in the classroom. So there's a sense of dignity that we're giving someone. And the focus really is on the teacher or the counselor at the front of the room. What I recommend is to sit down and think about your programs, think about what you're trying to convey, and make what's called a shot list and go through and be very descriptive. We want to have 3 photos that capture this, and I want the photos to be shot from this side of the room, and the focus be on this person doing X. Be as specific as you possibly can, and then orient that to that list with your team because you want them when they're in the room and doing their work to say, oh yeah, there's 3 pictures that we're trying to grab around this program. Let me go grab my phone and go grab these really quick. And then you can gather them throughout the year in a way that's authentic and makes sense and not be scrambling all of a sudden, oh, we need to get all these pictures, and that feels overwhelming. So make your list and really think about the ways that you can capture those that you serve while maintaining a sense of privacy and dignity within those actions. All right, some key reflections. Does your team have all the graphics that they need? just go ask them, you know, are you spending a half hour searching for stuff? What can we create for the team to have on the ready? Do you have logo files and graphics ready to go when you need them? Um, and then do you have usage guidelines in place to guide that? Do you have a brand guide? If you have a logo guide, that's great. But as you're adding these assets, like if you're putting together a library of photos, if you're putting together icons, expand your logo guide to become a true brand guide that gives, you know, instruction on color usage and that kind of stuff so that people know that. I also really recommend putting together your logo files that you would need, potentially just your PNG ones, along with your brand guide together in a folder so that when someone says, "Hey, I need your logo to include, you know, on this, you know, whatever piece of collateral," that you can say, "Great," and send them that folder that includes the logo and the brand usage guide. Um, so that it's ready to go and you're not always having to put together files um, for them. Okay, let's move on to reputation. Trusted brands really show up consistently and transparently in all they do. When I think about the food products or, you know, bath products that I use, and I say, man, I really want to have hand lotion that is clean and doesn't have a lot of chemicals in it. Well, when a brand really says, here's all the ingredients to this and it's clean and I feel like that it's consistent quality and I know what's in it and they're not hiding anything, that makes me trust them and it makes me continue to engage and buy that product. The same is true for nonprofit organizations. Um, so the action items within this thing are really building on each other. And we're going to start really basic here when it comes to reputation. Just slow down and check your work. Start with that. Proofread things, audit your website on a regular basis. Just check consistency. My challenge to you is don't let mistakes disrupt your narrative. If you have a fantastic campaign, um, and it has some really impactful stuff in it, but something goes out the door and there's a typo and a button doesn't work or a button goes to the wrong page from an email, those mistakes are disrupting your narrative. They're also opening up a story loop in someone's head where they say, huh, if that's wrong, is there other stuff going on wrong here? It makes people start questioning. So if you can just culturally slow down, check your work. Again, we know the stats around operational efficiency. So we want to show people, hey, we're really taking time to make sure everything is right here. We have checks and balances set up to make sure that everything is good when it goes out the door. I'll say this especially about your website, because a lot of times it's some of the first ways that people engage with you. So let's look at what a website audit checklist should be. I really recommend doing this about 4 times a year. Put 45 minutes on your calendar. That's less than 4 hours a year, just to make sure you're not having wrong things on your site. If you can swing it 6 times a year, even better, but at minimum four. Make sure all the buttons work on your site. The button's sitting there. I know this sounds silly, but you know, it just happens. Make sure forms are directing to the right people within your organization. If that person that left two months ago had a form go into their inbox, make sure it's not still going to their inbox and that that's been updated. Make sure your internal URLs, the internal pages of your website are correct. If you copied your about page to make a new page for a new program, make sure that that URL doesn't have nonprofit.org/about to. Make sure it says nonprofit.org/our new program or, you know, whatever that is. Make sure the links to your link out to external websites are correct and working. You can't control when someone else changes their website, but you can control where you're referring people to if you're sending them off of your site. This is a true story. Last weekend, I was pulling up a state level website, nonprofit, and I was clicking on some educational content. I don't know if it was a PDF or a video because what popped up when I clicked on it was some weird site and then a pop-up window that said my phone had been hacked. And that was on a large state level website. So it happens, but just 4 times a year at least, check to make sure those links are correct. Fix any typos or misspellings that you can catch. Make sure all your homepage info is up to date, including events or special campaigns. If you have an event that happened 2 months ago, it's on your homepage and it's still there, take it down or update it with pictures from the event. Don't let stuff sit there too long that's passed. Of course, make sure all your links to 990s and certification badges are up to date and easily, you know, visible. And then, of course, make sure you have a call to action above the footer on every page. Okay, action two, telling a consistent story wherever you show up. Remember that people need to hear something 5 to 7 times before it sticks. So think about the not just the visual consistency when you're doing a campaign, but also the messaging. There's a lot of different places that you have to have messaging. And so taking time to version out, telling the consistent story, but versioning out things appropriately for each platform, can just keep things really cohesive. Here's just a quick example. So it's for a nonprofit that serves women business owners. You can see on the far left that we had a copy document that had website copy, promotional email copy. If you kept scrolling, you would see all the different blurbs and copy for social media. They were all different links and appropriate, versions with hashtags for some, blurbs and none for others. But we had it on one page so that we could have consistency throughout the messaging. There's other ways that you can drive at consistency too. You can see this quote here from that was included. Not it when you look at the headline, "Grow Your Revenue with Catalyst," the quote from this person talks about how they grew their revenue through the Catalyst program. Although she never overtly says it, that's what she's talking about. So this was a way that was reinforcing this headline throughout the way. You can also just see the visual consistency, this kind of wavy line throughout it. So anytime I start to see this color combination, I'm going to know like, oh, this is about the Catalyst program. And if I was interested in it, it would be a visual cue to me to keep going. All right, action three, capture, contextualize, and champion your impact. Um, I really want to highlight the contextualize part in this. I think so often we will do some sort of evaluation and there's 10 data points that come out of it. And we hand it to our board of 20 people and we say, here's the data, but we've not given context to anything. We've not connected the dots. We don't say, I want to call out these 3 points and I want to tell you what these tell about our progress. And here's what you should take away from this. Use that using that data to strategically shape your stories gives people a way to understand the narrative. If you don't give them that narrative, they're going to create it themselves. If you have 20 board members and you give them all this data, you're going to have 20 different narratives that they're going to create based on their own experiences, based on their own personal interests. But if you will connect the dots for them, they can all come to the same conclusion and say, okay, I'm on the same page with you. Here's a quick example of this. This was an adult literacy collaborative. And what they really needed to do was to shift people away from focusing on specific achievements and asking questions like, well, how many people did you serve got their GED? What they wanted people to think about was broader, learner defined goals. We're not always going for some certificate. You can see on the left how, from one of their reports where they were starting to orient and educate people around learner defined goals, they have this fantastic quote from an adult learner that just says, my daughter is 5 and has great English. Giving context to that, to why I mean, when I read that, I'm like, oh my gosh, what an amazing goal. It has no certificate attached to it. So they're orienting people to what really matters and what they're tracking. And then you can see in a future report how they're giving the number of learners that they served and then how many met those learner defined goals. Now, when a board member looks at this or a community member looks at this, they can say, wow, almost 70% of the people they served hit their goal. That's a great stat. It looks like their referral system is really growing. They can also build on this in the future and say, gosh, This year, 80% of our learners, hit their goals. So this was a great example of how they were orienting to people to focus on the right stat and why. Action number 4, leading with transparency and visibility. Going back to some of those stats where we know that processes and people understanding processes are important. Don't underestimate just the power of showing your work sometimes. You don't have to give away the secret sauce, but just give some kind of overview of saying, here's the evaluation process that we used. Here's why. Here's how we process that data, and here are the outcomes from it. Here's what we're doing next. When people just have some kind of understanding of process that's going on behind the curtain, they can kind of understand and come along with you. This is also true when it comes to talking about compensation. I mean, we know that stat that I listed before that, when almost 70% of people understood some of that compensation and why it was there, that it made them trust the brand more. So if you are an organization that has a bunch of counselors and you want to be transparent of saying, we're trying to pay 80% of market rate for our counselors, and here's why, because we want to bring that kind of talent to serve our community, give people that understanding around that so that you can become an advocate for compensation. Key reflections around reputation. Think about what processes should be in place to ensure you're being correct, cohesive. Think about how you can culturally say, let's set a checks and balances system. Let's set some processes internally to make sure that we're doing well. Think about ways that you can update or improve how you're using data to tell your story. Um, if there's ways that you can sit down and really connect the dots for people in new or better ways than you have been doing, we know that that's impactful. And then this could be kind of a hard one, but from the outside looking in, ask yourself, does your organization look solid? Find a friend that you know is brutally honest and is going to cut it to you straight and say, what about my organization doesn't really make sense to you, or do you have questions about, or is a gray area? And for whatever answer that they give you, think about ways that you can kind of give some transparency around that and remove that question, remove that risk, because when we remove that risk, then people have clarity and they'll understand, and then they can have a deeper sense of trust. All right, let's move into the culture side of things. Um, when we think about culture and what that really means for an organization's identity, trusted brands really build and strengthen their identity from the inside out. So when we think about, when someone is really inside your organization, they should embody and understand your identity and be a beacon for that. So action item number 1 is really reflecting on your values and your office culture. Don't create an inauthentic workplace. I mean, if one of your values is gratitude, let's say, and you have a team that is always hitting their goals and doing great work in the community, and the director that's over that program is never really saying thank you for your great work to that team. Um, then you're not really living your values and not creating like an authentic workplace. So think about ways, and question that. Do our values really inform how we are building our internal culture? And are there ways that we can strengthen that? And sometimes those are really hard questions to ask, but ultimately, from a long-term perspective, they're worth it. Action number 2, on board with purpose and intention. This is how you're bringing people on and creating culture that informs that, greater identity. Let's say that you have created the messaging brand platform. You have created all these amazing visual assets. When you have new staff or board people come on, really taking time to have them learn those messages, practice them, make them their own. Every person speaks a little differently, has their own cadence of speaking. So if you have your elevator pitch, your core message, taking time to let people read through it, ask questions, practice it themselves, they might deliver it a little bit differently. But as long as those essential phrases are there, all of a sudden they've made that their own and they're much more likely to use it and bring that sense of messaging consistency when they've had time to really orient to that message and then practice it and make it their own. So key reflections around the culture aspect is, does your in-office culture vibe in your office honor your values? Um, and then does your onboarding process really give people what they need to speak for your organization? So you can see how the culture aspect starts to kind of bleed into the messaging aspect because you're giving people time to give people what they need to speak to the organization. You're telling them that their voice matters. Um, and that you want them to be a representative for your organization and you're investing time in doing that. All right, so here's a bit of a recap when it comes to your message, really enabling people to talk and share about your organization. When it comes to your visuals, give people the resources they need to get it right. Um, to really strengthen the reputation aspect of your identity is it's all about showing up consistently and transparently in everything that you do. Um, and then building and strengthening your identity from the inside out is the way that you can support your identity through a culture build out. The last thing I want to say around this is you might be sitting here and thinking, oh my gosh, this is a lot of stuff. I'm not really sure where to start. I'm a little bit overwhelmed, and there's only 3 people in our organization, and how would we ever have the time to do this? You don't have to do everything at once. Just start small, pick one thing. If you're sitting here and you're like, you know what, we do really need some talking points, we do really need some messaging. Take a few months and just chip away at it. Get some messaging down, and then check that off the list and move on to the next thing. You don't have to start one huge project, but just start small. Start with the thing that you feel like would get the most done quickly and serve the most uh, part of your team, and do that first, and then build from there. Okay, I got through this quick enough that think we do have some time for questions. So I'm gonna hand it over, I think, to Brittany to field whatever we need to field.
Jennifer has a question in the chat. She says, do you like infographics over graphs for storytelling?
I think that that's a great question. I think that it genuinely, it just depends on the content. I mean, I like infographics for sure. They can sometimes be hard to follow if it's a very complex thing. And if you have a really great achievement and you just want to show a comparison between this year and last year, don't make people read too much to get to that. Don't bury the lead. So, a graph might be more appropriate for a very impactful number. Whereas if you need to give people some major context because there's been a slight bump in something, an infographic where it's a little bit more meandering would be more appropriate.
Does anyone have any other questions? You're welcome to either type them in the chat or unmute and ask Jocelyn yourself.
Yeah.
I have a question. I'm Miranda Springer from Kid One Transport, and I just joined my nonprofit organization just a few weeks ago as a new executive director, and there's a lot to do from a branding standpoint. Do you have any tips on how to financially support something like that for a small nonprofit?
Sure. If there are smaller foundations in the area you could go seek some money from them to say, listen, this is what we're trying to do. I think having some kind of ROI or ultimate goal from it, take some of the stats from this presentation or go get some other stats from some of the sources cited in here to say, look, we're really trying to increase our visibility. We're really trying to increase donor. What our goal is to increase engagement by X amount, put together a case. And, you could, by doing that, then you're showing some of these larger foundations or donors kind of what those goals are instead of just, hey, we need to make things prettier. Um, but think about from a practical application standpoint what those goals are so that you can go make those asks with some real outcomes behind them. The other part of that is, if that's not an option, is to, I mean, there's great AI tools. I'm not afraid of using AI tools. If you're saying like, hey, here's our mission, vision, and values, give me some information around how I should be thinking about this organization. Or you can do searches for similar organizations throughout the country and see how they're talking about it and start to sort of craft that and customize it for yourself, in-house. So there's a lot of different options depending on what your, level of financial availability is.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Joycelyn, Christy asked in the chat, where do you recommend a cancer nonprofit start to educate the community statistically?
Well, I would say, when you say statistically, if you want to unmute, around maybe you need a little more context. So are you trying to educate the community around cancer care or
I'm
the
trying to
impact of
show,
cancer?
yeah, I'm trying to show the impact that we're making in the local community, like specifically with our event, so that they can see exactly, because that's our focus, to see it go
Sure,
back out in the community. So do
sure.
we statistically need to show them what we, donation wise, or what we spend on patient financial aid, or like what would be, I guess, a recommendation to start High Point with
Yeah,
helping the
yeah.
community
Well,
understand what we do.
certainly the number of people and families that you're serving. I would say focus first on your final, the person, the clients and people that you serve. That number is the number that people emotionally need to say, wow, there's actually more people than we realize. Or even a ratio. If you can say, in communities of this size, 20% of people or, 20% of families will be affected by cancer. And then if your service to that community is almost as, reaching everyone, that's a great stat to share. So starting with the in person that you serve, and then you can walk back from that and say, to do that, we spend X amount, here's what our financials look like. We spend this amount on patient education. We spend this amount on whatever. As far as getting stuff out to the community, I mean, especially in a more small town area, thinking about doing stuff with a Chamber of Commerce. They have monthly presentations often. Where you can start to present to business owners and create that sort of awareness. Articles in newspapers of that coverage and highlighting a local nonprofit. Those are really great ways in getting the word out. Because those people are going to say, wow, I went to this presentation. This nonprofit serves all these people. They will become mouthpieces for your organization just because they went and saw a presentation you gave at a chamber event.
Yeah.
So think
I like
about
it.
those
Thank you.
ways that you
Okay.
can start to put that together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think Christy's doing that and doing that well.
Thank you, Brittany.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Let's see. I'm looking at the chat too. Let's see. Sarah Sullivan said, yes. Oh, she put it to everyone. Yeah. It's not who you know or what you can do, but who knows what you can do. Yes, that's a great, great quote for sure.
Well, Joycelyn, thank you so much for that inspiring program today. For
Yeah,
everyone joining
absolutely.
us, please keep an eye out from an email from me. It'll have a link to the presentation and recording and an opportunity to sign up as a Carey Center nonprofit affiliate if you are not already one. Our nonprofit affiliate program now serves more than 470 nonprofits across Alabama and beyond, and it's a great way to access educational programs, professional development, and networking opportunities, and membership is completely free. The Carey Center Nonprofit Consultant Directory connects nonprofits with trusted experts, just like Jocelyn, who is a member of our directory, in areas such as fundraising, board development, marketing, and strategic planning. Whether you're launching something new or solving a challenge, you can find experienced partners ready to help move your mission forward, explore the directory, and take your organizations to the next level. We're also excited to share information about the Carey Center Nonprofit Professional Certificate. This is an online, non-degreed certificate developed in partnership with the Auburn University Office of Professional and Continuing Education and Merit Nonprofit Professional Development. Merit is an anytime, anywhere microlearning platform that helps nonprofit professionals strengthen 6 key areas, including leading, learning, resource generating, planning, managing, and overseeing. Thank you all again for joining us, and we hope to see you at one of our monthly virtual programs or in person when our nonprofit training series comes to your part of the state. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. And here's my information if anyone ever wants to reach out. Really appreciate everyone's time today and all the people who asked questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you.